Surprise! We are doing another episode of Feed the Trolls. We weren't going to, but here we are, the final episode of the year. It's actually episode 30, and we thought NER0 should join us because he was our first guest on our first ever episode.
He also just was available for the episode. I actually didn't plan that at all. Just, I don't know. The actual real reason is because if you want someone for like a wrap-up episode, you do need people that just watching the odd game of who they like. You have to watch somebody watch basically the whole tournament. There's not that many people nowadays who really just watch all the matches.
Yeah, it was lucky because I went to China for the RMR, so I was like, I didn't even try and fix my jet lag. Like I came home and I was just living... Like, I was just living on China time, and every time I had to do anything in the evening, like, it was just, like, the UK evening, I was just completely ruined. I had, like, 2 hours sleep for most of that, so... But, yeah, I did manage to watch the games, and it was a great major, actually. Like, I think if the highlights weren't all at 3 a.m, people would be much more positive about it. But
mate, that final, for real, if that was in the perfect time zone, I think that final had a chance to break the records, mate. Imagine if it actually got to OT as well. That could have been, like, the best match ever.
Yeah, 100%, I think.
I mean, you're talking about the final. It kind of ties into what I wanted to do today, because I thought I went through all our episodes we've done this year to talk, like, look at the talking points and then kind of recap based on what we saw at the major and what we were talking about. And I have to say, I don't like to do this, but I do think we should give ourselves a little pat on the back. Because in all
totally off-brand for me to do that. But
not at all.
What was I good at this year? Yeah, let's think.
It's super ironic. Someone did say to me during... Yeah, someone during the major said to me, "Oh, you behaving a little bit like Thorin when you make those comments." And I was like, "Well, here I am now. I'm going to talk about all the things we got right."
All I'm going to say is, listen, you guys in the industry don't know what incentives to give. If you'd actually been as woke as you thought, you could have given her all the jobs before she ever had to come across some unscrupulous character like me on the road to success, as it were, who could take. All I'm going to say is, I acted a bit more like me. How's it all worked out? Doing majors. People are hating on you. That's an essential quality in Counter-Strike, by the way. That means they care, actually. Like, they hate on everything. They even hate on the bloody game. So don't worry about it. That means they love you in a way.
Yeah. Was it you for Paris as well, then? Was that you pulling the strings as well, or just weighing along?
Just like
that happened. Yeah, that was just like... But one of the things we spoke about time and time again, whenever we did an episode about FaZe, was we would be honest about the fact that they weren't doing a great job. We were very honest about the fact that things probably had to change.
Wasn't every episode just which player should FaZe change? I don't think it was even a question of should they actually. It was just like which players should they change, wasn't it?
It was always like which should it change, and then also secretly we all love FaZe and we think that they can do really well. And then when we did our major predictions, I put them in the title of the video, and I still said who will win the major.
Okay.
And I mentioned FaZe.
Clickbait, of course. Well done.
Yeah. Someone commented on that going, "Why would you put FaZe in the title?" Ooh, first thing I did. When they made that final, I was like,
"Oh, did you really go back? You didn't really go back and do a Richard Lewis in the it would have been funny if you had.
I thought about it.
It would have been funny, okay.
I wanted to be like, there you go. But
of course.
There we go.
By the way, unironically, that is what fans do, though. I'm not joking. If I ever do like a prediction video, they go 1 minute after the prediction is wrong, even if it's weeks later, and they go back, and if you ever go put it in newest YouTube, they just put a comment like, "This was wrong." It's like, well, yeah, but you know that now. Like, we didn't know at the time I made the video, did we? Like, what? That's so whack. Come on.
Well, the FaZe, I want to give us a pat on the back because we didn't ever stop believing. We knew that there were problems, but we all said at some point or another, karrigan could, if anyone was going to make it happen, karrigan could make it happen.
Sure.
And I don't know about anyone else, but my heart broke in that third map because I wanted overtime. I think everyone wanted overtime. Yeah. I wanted FaZe to win the whole damn thing.
Also, if you're going to do a massive comeback, don't just blow it on the last round. At least have the good grace to give us the OT. Like, at that point, just lose, whatever it was, 12, 13, and 7 or something. Just lose easy. Because the worst thing as well is, if you remember at the end, they had a 2v1 at the very last second as well. It was insane. Yeah. It was like, oh, you've done all the hard part. You're hitting jumping no scopes, but you can't just win the 2v1. Why? Why is this a thing? Also, I will say, that's actually how far FaZe went this year, though, Sam. It's because they gave you nothing to work with in all the other tournaments. Even Cologne was actually whacked the way it ended, just get beaten by Saw in the most unconvincing fashion ever. That did absolutely test my limit. At the end, I almost didn't believe. And I also think this was the miracle run of all miracles. At least they were actually good when they did the miracle runs before. This one was some fairy book stuff for me. It was crazy.
Yeah, I think they're like the analyst's dream of a cop-out team that you can say at the start, oh, they're probably going to bomb the RMR or make the final. That classic team was no one's predicting them to finish 8th, but you just know they always have something in them. Especially karrigan, it's just especially with all the personal stuff going on as well, to be able to hit that gear that we haven't seen for so long, in normal environments as well. That's just I've I remember saying like a few years ago like they're the most entertaining team ever. Like to that 2022 peak, like I think every time you tune in, you just know there's going to be nonsense like 2v4s and just complete crap. And for the first time in a while, like that was back in China, which was really cool.
Even some of the games they used to lose would just be straight fire games. It's like win or lose, you just know you get. They are the team you would pay to watch live for the ticket price. Yeah, absolutely.
I also just think even his interviews during the major just made it. That was that fed into my like sort of I want to believe in the dream. Karrigan was like, no, I know I am delusional, but when he even said I want the hardest round, give me.
Oh, that is gangster. I can't lie. I know.
Yeah. When he said that, he was like, give it to, and then in that third map, when it looked like that was it and it was done, there was that moment where you saw the click, and I actually think Dust was sitting next to me where he was like, there it is, they're in the zone, because they put the cameras on, and every single one of those players, I got goosebumps at the time. You could see they all looked different, and then they were just getting round after round, and I was like, we were, I mean, I think anyone watching that, it was 11 in the morning, so maybe we were just exhausted.
Sure, you tossed
but
it.
we were all like, this is insane.
Yeah.
However, I mean, I think regardless of how he felt and how magical it was, it broke my heart, obviously, with all the personal stuff going on for him not to win that trophy for his brother, but it doesn't change the fact that I think even if they'd lifted that trophy, something at FaZe has to change, right? Going into 2025.
Well, that's the funniest thing, though.
Staying the same?
Think about this, right? That would be an amazing convo to have if they'd somehow won in OT of like, well, you know, at the same time they have beaten the Murderers Row of the top teams of the year to win the major, you know, should they keep the like? What's mad is, this is how you know the final was amazing. They didn't win the final, and everyone's doing that conversation like, well, you can't break up now, can you, after not winning the major? It's like, what? Yeah, you can. Like, believe it or not, how hard that was to beat all those amazing games where, by the way, every series they walked on water. Like, they were behind, they were in tough spots, people had to drop 30 bombs, etc. Like, it was insane to even get to the point where they could win. I will say, Karrigan's comment was gangster at the time, has aged poorly now. If I could go back in time, I'd go, whoa, Karrigan. What you need to say is, I want Vitality, then G2, and then in the final, let's just have it be Mouse, you know, for the all-time cycle. That's what you wish you'd said, mate. Now, sadly, you invoked the demon, you brought donk out, you idiot. What are you doing that for? Right. Also, that his quotes, they don't look as good when donk does just kick the shit out of you in the finals. You know, it sounds cool before, like, hey, he's not going to let some 17-year-old take the trophy. Oh, he's just taking them all. Shit, well, my bad. Guess I am. Okay. By the way, there's actually a part, though, Sam, I do think, because on the broadcast, people didn't emphasize that part about his brother, understandably. We just kept it like sports. It was about FaZe not winning. And obviously, by the way, you'd be sad not winning the major anyway. You saw how Niko was, etc. But I actually don't think people realize the true tragedy of that until they saw the tweet. Is think about this. That means, right, I'll give you a very good example, people that might know from sports, right? The most famous motorsports death ever is Ayrton Senna, the legendary Brazilian Formula One driver. But there's a detail that makes it even more insane how he died, which is that at the same event, in the qualifying part of like Formula One, an Austrian driver died, right, in the qualifying. And so when Ayrton Senna died in the actual race itself, he wouldn't just find he was dead. Inside of his car, there was an Austrian flag that when he finished the race, he planned to bring out as a tribute to the dead driver to be like, oh yeah, but then he never got to do it because he himself, that means when Karrigan did that tweet, he probably, unironically, when he's doing this massive comeback and getting him up there, is thinking like, when I win, I'm going to do, and he probably had like a whole prepared thing that he was going to say to, I'm going to guess, tribute to his brother or something cool. By the way, like people like Dupree got to do when they won their majors, but he actually then got denied, even worse than like the closest margin imaginable. So yeah, it becomes like really crazy, the emotional sort of stakes that were at play there. Like, it wasn't just a match to these guys.
And it's always more credit to him. Oh, sorry, but just really like, it's almost more credit to him because you think about how many near misses he's had in his career, and he's still probably the GOAT. Like, you're the GOAT, and you've lost this many close games, and it doesn't hold you back from that GOAT status. Like, that just says a lot about his career.
Yeah, agreed.
I also think it just says so much about his mental tenacity, because I don't think people realize how long these teams were sitting in China. So one, you're far away from your family. Your whole family's just gone through this horrific loss. You're completely on your own in China with your team.
I wouldn't blame anyone if they just said, sorry guys, I must have to go home. If they bring a, yeah, that'd be totally reasonable. No one would criticize if you did that, I think.
FaZe did, right?
So did they? They offered it, right.
So most teams stayed between the RMR and the major, but FaZe did go back.
Right. But I mean, if he just said, I can't do the major, like, I'm thinking about, by the way, Device for health reasons couldn't play the major. If someone said, look, guys, under these circumstances, I have to quit, I wouldn't blame you. But I always say this, but if you do play and you're really good, then you get like bonus fucking points from me, like plus 10 bonus points for that, yeah.
karrigan just raised like 10 levels after that. I mean, even though they lost, I was like, that's it. Like, no one can ever say a mean thing about him. Not on the show, not on a desk. If I'm ever hosting, I don't want to hear it. Like, don't ever say.
Yeah. Okay, you're gonna like backhand him or something. Okay.
Yeah. karrigan's my IGL. Shut the hell up. That's
Exactly.
where I'm at. And
Well,
if FaZe,
Karrigan
wherever
slander,
he
get
goes,
out.
yeah. If he leaves FaZe, I don't care. Wherever he goes, I will be that team supporter. That's where I'm at. But obviously, we spoke a lot about the fact that he didn't win because he was beaten by donk, which was a conversation that we also had quite a few times. And it is, of course, the player of the year conversation. m0NESY versus donk. I'm taking ZywOo out of it completely. I just don't think he's in that conversation anymore. So let's have it now, because I think at the beginning of the year you were leaning towards m0NESY. Thorin, you're still sitting on the m0NESY.
Here's the thing. Normally, I do think, because I'm obviously watching all the games, I have a very good memory. Normally, I don't ever need to do, like, revisit the team. I could do my top 20 normally just off the top of my head. Like, I could just think through, like, who did what, and then what, oh, yeah, wait, in the first quarter, they were, if you notice, when I describe players, I'm pretty good at knowing when they were peaking and when they had their downtime, etc. But I have to say, this is the only time ever that I think I'm actually going to go back and for real just do, like, 10 hours of watching all the big games for both players. Because the biggest problem I have is, normally, I'm not their stats first guy, but the stats are actually the craziest stats ever in the history of Counter-Strike. Like, even simples, which are almost the same number, make way more sense when you add in the role he's playing and the game he's playing and what the maps were like. The problem is, donk's stats almost imply that, like, if you think he isn't the GOAT, you should almost, just for the due diligence, revisit his games and actually really check. Because I do think it does look like, I always say this, whenever I watch him play, he's just the best player I've ever seen play. Never mind, like, right in this year. But the problem is, when I think of things normally, if all things are equal and you have a player like donk and a player like m0NESY, I'm typically biased to the player like m0NESY. I often give the comparison of, if you think of 2017 SK, they had two monsters. They had Fur, who was this mega aggressive player who tore all the games open. In fact, fully enough, against karrigan's FaZe most of the time, and all those overpass CT sides. But you had coldzera as well, who was the ultimate closer. You could never stop this guy winning the round. And I always used to say, the problem is, even though what Fur does is incredible, essentially you can make a 5v4 and your team can fuck it up and you lose the round. But the thing about a coldzera is, when they close the round, it's over. You've won the game. So if you think about what wins you matches, it's hard to actually evaluate between the two. But the difference is, I do think, this is why I'm going to revisit it. That's if all things are equal. I think because there is a stats gap, I might actually go and revisit, like, the m0NESY down games and look at his worst matches and try and figure out, like, what was the flaw of both players. Because the problem is, I do think m0NESY was amazing at creating moments, especially because he's clutching, he's having finals, he carries in. I also think, as you saw from NERO's article, he was in the arena an unbelievable player. Like, essentially, he rose to the moment over and over again. The difference with donk is, I don't think I've ever seen a player that had a flaw like that. Like, it's not a joke, because people were mega ZywOo fans who were salty. They've almost chronicled every single bad map donk had, and it feels like there was about, like, 7 the whole year, Nero. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't even have much to work with. They had to like, in that, the best one is in that mouse series. They had to make such a big deal out of the first map, and then, as I pointed out, over the next 2 maps, he was like 0.97 KDR, like KPR. Like, if you don't know, that's inhuman. Like, essentially, after his worst map, he just went supernova. So, like, I have a really hard time with this. I think this is the only year ever where, even when I pick whoever it is, whoever's the second is 1B. I don't even think it's one of those ones where it's like, and he's hit 1 and you're 2. Like, I did think there was years where Simple and ZywOo were really close, but I could use factors like, I thought Simple would play better in the big games, etc. I don't even know if it's hard to actually find what my downsides for donk. That's why I say I've got to revisit it. So I do, at the moment, my bias says m0NESY, but I'm actually going to revisit it. I might change my mind to donk on that one.
I think for donks, like, to be the devil's advocate, because that's how this podcast started.
Yeah, go for it.
So donk pointed to it himself, right, that he had 2 kind of poor events. Like, Cologne's the big one, where even though it's against the Mongols and G2, he's like, m0NESY's not had an event like that this year, right?
That's
so
true.
m0NESY's only bad event this whole year is spring final, when he literally got out the car, and it was like, because I was there for that, and it was, he ran out the car, got in the booth, and then all the blast happens, like, we're starting the game in 2 minutes.
Oh, he had visa issues or something. Yeah. He got delayed, right?
Yeah, so he had visa issues. He didn't get there until... So a lot of players would have just stayed at home. Like,
yeah, that's totally reasonable. Okay?
Yeah. He's in the airport for, like, a day. He gets to the event. He plays badly map 1. Then in between map 2 and 3, he warms up, and in map 3, he's good again. Like, it was literally that, and then he gets eliminated. So it was literally not even his fault that he's had a bad event. And then, like you said, with the arena stuff as well. And I think one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in CS2 is people still have this kind of old school assumption that it's easier to be an AWPer than it is to be a rifler.
Sure. Yeah, that definitely is a stigma.
That's true.
For sure.
And that's definitely true, like, over all players, but you're forgetting that, like, the rifler's average has all the roles in it, right? like when you look at people in Donk's exact positions, like the star players for every team, like an aggressive star player who's able to, like if I could pick any player for the first 5 rounds of a match, I pick Donk because his Glock will get you 4 kills. He's like and best anti-eco player in the world. First gun round, he'll just rip someone off with an AK. Just
Let me put it this way, to reframe what you're saying, you could the second best AWP, if we're saying m0NESY's the best, the saying it's z it's pretty close. Whoever's the second best rifle, it's not even a conversation. Like say I say it's Exertion, it's not really that close stats-wise, right? He's kind of in another world, isn't he?
Yeah, so like the Zai was there, but then he's the hybrid. Because I think we were looking at, because we've started having the kind of top 20 conversations, and it's actually weird how few AWPers are going to be in that conversation.
Sure.
Like, like we're doing the panel, like the HW Award panel as well, like the top 10 AWPers of the year, like people like Holzerk are getting in.
Oh, it
like,
gets rough at the bottom, yeah.
But this is the level we're talking about.
That's why I always told people, that's how you know actually people like Wonderful and some players did get hated on it. It's like, bro, who else are you taking? Like, there's only, unironically, about 6 or 7 like star names at AWP even, mate. There's not many.
Yeah, like it is. I always think it's the best drivers get the best F1 cars type of thing, right? And someone like Donk doesn't need that car because he can just drive any car. And
yes,
I think just an aggressive rifler who has Donk's ability can farm stats like no AWPer can. Because every AWPer, even m0NESY, will be throwing flashes for executes. Donk will be going in and killing 2 people every time. And that is just the way to break stats. And maybe so that conversation is a little bit weird when it comes to trying to adjust for things. But yeah, I mean, obviously, as a rifler, no one's ever been able to break stats in the way Donk does. So it's not a point against Donk. It's just that in CS2, I think people need to respect AWPing a little bit more than they currently do. I know it's a tangent, but I think most people would agree on that by now.
I'll give you one other angle as well, which is if you look at outside of their play, like what are the factors that attenuate how deep you go in a tournament, and therefore can you get an EVP? Can you get an MVP? I mean, famously, actually, Donk was the player where if you look at this year, him and m0NESY had a million times where they could have been the MVP, but they couldn't get to the final. Like they start in the semis and the quarters. Like the difference is actually if z0 played insane, usually he could get to a final. He'd have the chance to be on the losing team and even get the MVP. The others never got that chance because I think both of them it's tough to evaluate because first of all, z0 had overall, I think, more help than all of them. I think that's just the way the year went. If you remember, m0NESY had like not much help at the beginning when it was the hooXi NEXA lineup that was a bit scuffed. They could never make a final. And then later he had loads of help, but I'd say the team environment got worse. So you're sort of trading team for help there at that point. And then for Donk, I would say he had like a team environment that was good, but it was obviously a bit fragile. It was still a rookie squad, etc. And then his help was kind of more like, it was more like consistent but limited. Like Shiro's not Niko. He's not going to like actually be the MVP of your tournament most of the time. He's just a really good player. I mean, in a normal team, he'd be the 1B. He's just the second option in this team, though. So I do think it's more tricky to evaluate the pieces around them, too. Like, part of me feels it. This is another reason why I keep thinking I might revisit the Donk videos and see those. I can remember all the m0NESY ones. The problem with the Donk ones is, like this final, essentially, it wasn't Donk's choice to win the final, guys, even though he might have played the best final ever. Like, if Magix didn't do all the stuff he was doing, I think he probably lost to loses 2-0. Like, he actually could have played by the way, he could have played the identical map 3 where you drop a 30 bomb with like whatever 14 kills, and he would have lost that. Like, if they hadn't have had like certain keyword, like Magix does that rotation at the top of Maidon does. Like, the factors that go in a Donk win, this is why he reminds me of Simple in like 2018. It's like you can actually play the best CS I've ever seen and lose. Whereas I feel like normally, especially once you got Niko and Malbs, actually, if you play it out your mind, if you're m0NESY, you should win the match. You know what I mean? I think you always are. And here's the difference. Donk can never have a bad series. m0NESY has had bad series and people have won in the game, or average series for him at least, you know, at more that angle. So I do think I think it's actually the toughest one ever here, Raw. There's past years where it's more like, what's your bias? What do you prefer? I think this is the year where it's like, if you're honest with yourself, you can find a reason that you're wrong and pick another factor and make it the other guy. I think it's really tough this year. I think it's the hardest one ever.
Yeah, it's just going to be Donk's raw figures, right? That kind of probably push him over for most people.
Do you think if he hadn't have won the major,
well,
if he did the exact same, he got all the same kills, but like at the end, FaZe pipped him to the post, would that have changed? Do you think how people vote him number 1 would it have affected it?
I mean, for HLTV at least, I think it would have been like, because we kind of wait events, right? And I think if he'd have gone out in quarters, played exactly the same, like we would have been in complete nightmare fuel and even closer than it is now, because it's still close. Like I'm not spoiling anything because it's not decided.
Yeah, sure.
But like so I think Magix has basically given him the assist, right? Because if Magix plays at like his normal level,
sure.
like m0NESY was the favorite going into this event. Like that's not a spoiler. Like m0NESY
makes sense, of course.
He had the worst event of the big 3. Like Niko was more important in groups and everything. So it's that thing. But I think the thing with Donk's team is that these players are just nowhere. Like Chopper, a core of Chopper, Magix, and
Or it
Zontic
can low frag. I
I
always say the second Zontic's low frags. You have a team with 3 low fraggers potentially in. Like that is, you can see it's an inhumane task to try and drag that over the finish line sometimes.
Yeah. And Shiro, like, he's the type of Orper I love because I was like a Device fan in 2016 or something, right? So,
do you want to know a cool detail? You'll
Go
appreciate this. When I was DMing with him, this isn't anything that's going to be crazy. I'm sure he's fine with saying this. I said to him, because believe it or not, he buys some of the hype of all this bullshit. People telling him he's just like a passive Orper. And I told him, bro, what are you talking about? You're basically like Device. And he was like probably the best traditional style Orper ever. He said, I was a big fan of Device. So perfect. That's what you want right there. That's the play, Mitch. Modeling game off him. You're him as Russian.
Yeah, for a long time I was trying to run agendas of Axel being Dupree, and then the Shiro's
that's not bad.
Just completely dumped it just straight away. He made the right call there. Donk's a little bit better than Dupree ever will be as well, so that's fine. But yeah, I think the thing with Shiro is even him, like the pressure moments, like we know they're going to get to him a little bit, right? So you've got your second star feels the pressure, and then Zontix and Magix are like solid role players, and then Chopper's not like a world-class IGL. He's been here for 10 years.
Yes.
And they've won the major. And you just have to put it down to Duncan. Even if you expect the 25 kills every map, like we can never treat this like it's normal.
Put it this way, if you were to, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure he's probably the star player that won the major. Remember, he set the record at the major. He's won the major with probably the biggest individual stats and the least help from his team. I know obviously Magic in the final was dope, but like if you think like piece-wise, like you're saying, what the roles are, he's actually has, in theory, this is why I think this guy might be the GOAT one day, because he shouldn't have won any of these tournaments. He should have won Katowice, he should have won the major. He just does. It just makes it, it just bends reality somehow.
As the karrigan stan, I'm super pissed off that Magix decided to play the way he did in the final.
Since you know what's even worse? I tortured myself. Someone said on a show, how many times, I think it was Casadas, how many times has anyone even done a plus 30? And I thought, well, it must have happened a few times. Well, it's got to be like 5. So I think someone looked it up, it was like 3 times ever. And by the way, they're like, like, I think it's like Prime Olaf and like Snax or something ridiculous. Like, what? So the list goes like, if it is Olaf, it's like some insane rifler, maybe Cold Zeros. It might have been Cold Zero, Snax, and then it's like, and Magix. It's like, which one's the odd one out? Like, get that meme with the clown in all the Marines or whatever. We all know that's ridiculous. What are the chances that would happen? Bloody karrigan. Why does he have to make me fall in love and then just break my heart again every time?
With Shiro as well. It's a choking Shiro winning the 1v2. Like, you're watching that, and Shiro in the 1v2, and you're like, he's literally going to like throw his mouse out. He's shaking so hard, and then he just wins it. Just goes full Gambit Online clutch 1v2. It's like, okay.
By the way, look, I get that, some of these people are young. Some of them, like Chopper and Magic, probably never thought they'd win a major, but holy moly, people were right. Like, on some Maui Snake shit. Aside from Shiro, that is the most auraless team of all time. Like, I guess Donk did the swag walk and Shiro cheered, but the rest of them were just like, oh, we won. We just won the world championship. For me, shit. Like, it was crazy. I was like, we'll do something. Like,
the worst for me were the winners interviews. So the Russian interviews, hooXi translated them, and the Russian interviews were actually really good. They were very emotional. They were very heartfelt. But then we moved to the English interviews, and that was just
they were checked out. It was crazy.
It was the weirdest just won the major. I'm not answering that shit. My favorite was Donk when they were trying to give him the PC.
I love that. I just love the. That's so wild.
My favorite was at the end of all of that, they're showing him this PC that obviously, Perfect World is so proud of. They're on the stage, and his response is, I don't care.
I love it.
And that was the last word we got from the team that won the major. And I was like,
so
what
stupid, isn't it? I know.
And the whole time this is happening, karrigan is in tears, and I'm like, someone get him off the stage. Like, anyway, I mean, for me, I'm going to be controversial here. I know the stats speak, and I've jumped between the two, but I feel like Donk has to get it just because of the fact that if you take a look at his stats, but outside of the fact that he carried that entire team through the year, it was his rookie year, and he's done things that I don't think we'll see for a long time. I think this is just the start. Like, for me, that kind of gives it to him. And also, I always said that it came down to who went the furthest in the major. I think the fact that he made the finals and he did do what he did How can you not give him player of the
You
year?
know what also
Like,
did all the guys at HLTV
Just-
a massive fucking solid is that the team of the year actually is just Na'Vi, and then they just occupied all the finals and the majors, because otherwise, if it had been like, you know, say Zebu's team had won all the events, then all of a sudden it would just change the whole factor of like, well, who got to the final and who was there. It's almost like if you look at the three teams, they all peaked and like took different times to go up and down on the calendar. So by you look at all the prestige events, it's actually fairly evenly distributed in terms of who's making finals. I feel like actually in some ways the teams allowed us to just make it the player. We can just pick the player, whereas normally the team definitely has a massive say. Like I've always said, I'm one of the few people in 2018 where everyone put Simple 1, but HLTV famously put Device 2, because obviously he was in like every EVP, wasn't he? But I've always thought Niko was better that year. And if you look at what he did, I would have picked him. But I understand team success is going to be more fresh in people's minds, etc. I think this year, actually, we sort of got a favour that none of their team was the best team of the year. Like, I think that's big. I think if that would have really overshadowed the narrative, in my opinion. Like, by the way, same for G2. If G2 would win it, I'm sure everyone now would be going, but how could it not be m0NESY? He won the major. So that narrative always gets to people. It's a very popular one, for sure.
I think that's the only thing kind of holding me back from the kind of donk GOAT year thing, is just that the scene just does feel weaker. Like the kind of simple 2018, right? Like the teams he's doing it against, like the kind of SK Dynasty, even if it's a little bit washed up already, like this Primus
They're still decent.
Like, and he's still the top one player with the same, like, similar numbers to what donk put up this year. And I think, like,
I'm sure his sample size will have been way bigger. He played way more tournaments back then.
Yeah,
right?
like one event a week and everything.
Yeah.
And donk skipped events this year as well, which people will forget.
Yes. Oh, that's also another thing people forget. To be fair, I think m0NESY had played something like 50 maps more or something crazy like that. It was like, he played quite a lot more maps in like arenas and stuff or whatever it was. It was a lot, yeah.
Yep. And so this is the thing is, like, once Na'Vi were knocked out, I was just looking at the playoffs bracket and I was like, this is going to be a really exciting playoffs bracket. But also, are any of these teams actually good? Like any of them?
Yeah.
Because like Vitality, we knew like the Spinks thing was all going on. Like those rooms have been there for months. So it's just like dead team v dead team. And then Spirit with donk. And as much as it was so exciting to have these kind of like 6 teams who are all kind of the same level, like I just think when we look back in a few years and there is someone who might have, you know, kind of solved CS2 in a way that no one really has yet, and actually has the kind of dominance that we thought Na'Vi might have had, we might look back and think this is kind of like a weird parity era major. Like, not quite like a Gambit one, because obviously Gambit didn't have donk in Krakow, but like kind of similar in that teams are all in kind of weird transitional phases, it felt like at this major. So that's the only thing
joke
that
is, even though Spirit probably aren't and weren't going to make a roster move, everyone wants them to make a roster move too before they won the major. So you're right, almost every top team that was in the playoffs, everyone wanted to change basically anyway. Win or lose.
Yeah.
We also spoke a lot about dead teams walking, because Vitality and G2 were confirmed dead teams walking, and that we knew players were going. FaZe, there was all the question marks, but like there hadn't actually been any comments about anyone unhappy in the lineup. Yeah. So I did think it was kind of poetic that the 2 teams who made the finals were the 2 that like there wasn't any conversation about players wanting to leave. We all wanted roster changes, but they had kind of stuck to their guns. That worked in a way, but this does kind of, we've spoken about m0NESY, so I want to recap on the conversation that made us get a lot of hits. That was probably the most popular conversation on Feed the Trolls for the whole year. NER0, you were there. You got to enjoy it. It came up so many times after you, which was the hooXi G2 debate. So I suppose the question now is, was Snax the better option over hooXi? Are we happy with this IGL for G2?
Well, I think even Thorin at the time wasn't saying that Snax was the best IGL of all time, right? And I think it's we've completely seen that everything everyone has ever said about G2 was right, which is that it doesn't really matter who you put in as in-game leader.
Exactly.
Like these players are going to play exactly the same way. They're going to call around themselves on CT sides. Like I think maybe there's like 2 in-game leaders in the whole game that might have the aura to actually like get them to listen. And I think it's like karrigan, and then I don't know, even the second one was like kind of hard to think of that is actually going to change this team's identity. I think it wasn't hooXi's fault. This team had this identity, is what has been very clear, right? The floor they showed at Rio, like that was just crazy, right? Like this is not something that teams should do. And I think as much as people are starting to praise Taz a bit more now, like people like m0NESY's praised Taz and things, and you can't know from the outside, but they live and die by the firepower. And to me, the only difference between G2 this season and last season is that m0NESY is a top 10 player in the world and Nexa is barely a top 100. And that's literally the only difference for me. I've not seen any improvement in calling. If anything, I've seen a bit of a decline in calling. So yeah, I think I was kind of right on the hooXi one, which is that he was being scapegoated, and that the actual problem was firepower. Because I remember saying at the time that nexy was a bad anchor and that Hunter would needed to step up. Right, that was kind of my argument, was that if you're going to make changes, I don't think it's hooXi that you're going to get the most improvement from. And I think that mouths change, as much as maybe I wondered about his CT side, and I think I'm right about his CT side.
He still has issues, yeah. He still has issues.
Like if you check his he's like 1.05 on the CT side. Yeah. So he's not amazing on CT side, but the firepower he offers on T side is literally the difference. And that is what is winning them these trophies that they weren't winning at first, I don't think. So I think, I don't know what you think, but I think hooXi has actually come off rather well in this last 6 months, because I don't think Tax has.
Yeah, but that's also my problem. I always said when they had JKS, I didn't have a problem with them having hooXi, because they had enough firepower that it activated and made it work. The problem is when you had Nexa and hooXi, and then some people only were doing the Nexa angle. Because I do think the worst thing is the G2 GM, technically I believe it's a different person from the first one, but the G2 GM must really hate everyone who likes A/B testing, because he's never allowed us to actually fucking do it. Because what he does is he changes 2 players, but then the pleb just looks at the IGL and goes, this hooXi is much better than LexiB. And everyone, including LexiB, is like, I had Jackson, he has JKS. This is bullshit. And so the same thing now, all the people like apologize to Snax. It's like, but you know what? hooXi didn't have fucking Malbs, did he? He had Hunter in that spot, not doing all that stuff, and then Nexa just dying and not winning any clutches. Like, it's pretty unfair to hooXi actually to compare Snax to him. Like, the real problem here is we never got to see Snax with the other lineup. By the way, I'll say it right now. I think Snax with that Nexa lineup fucking dire. Like, I think they would just get bounced at the round of 6 or whatever you call it. Like, I don't even know if they'd win a trophy. Like, I think it'd be too hard to carry at that point in time. Like, think about how many times Malbs, by the way, including in the 3rd map against Heroic, just saved their asses. Just not, by the way, not a strat, not a call, not anything that a coach is telling him. He just literally shoot someone in the head. Like it's almost like, since people know in that team the famous meme of like Niko go kill, like, they're not even saying anything to Malbs and he just shoots people in the head. Like, it's actually ridiculous. So I think that, by the way, easily the pickup of the year as well. What a great addition. What a game changer that was. But I also think if people have recency bias and they think of this semi-final, which was epic against FaZe, I don't think spiritually they even deserve to be in that semi-final. Like, Niko saved their ass from getting 2-0'd by Heroic. Like, and even on the 3rd map, they were constantly down. There was so many hero individual players that don't. I can just tell you, the coach and the IGL don't make that call. Like, that's just a player making a play.
I mean, the one thing I'd say in favour of Snax, to just try to offer some balance, because I think I've been critical of Snax as well, but I think in terms of personality, I think he might be perfect for the kind of the big moments. As much as it didn't really happen this time, I feel like the kind of like the Niko and Hunter, like what would help Niko and Hunter in like a high pressure situation. I think Snax' calmness, and he just does win his 1v1s as well. Like hooXi doesn't win the 1v1s. The Snax was winning this event. Like individually, Snax this event was miles better than what hooXi has ever been, really. So I think there is that kind of improvement. And I think I'll be very interested to see next year with Snax and then Malbs in these star positions. Like, that is going to be a learning process because of the level G2 player. And I think we will be able to judge Snax and Taz much more fairly without Niko there to hold everyone's hands. Like,
the biggest giveaway in that whole story was there was an interview, I'm going to say, I think it was around last fall, because I know it was around when they won a championship, where it was implied that actually Niko makes tons of mid-round calls. I have to say, after having seen Niko have like friction with karrigan and LexiB, who I think are genius IGLs that you just let work, but then suddenly be always fine with these IGLs where no one even knows how much authority do they have. I get the feeling actually in a Niko team, half of your job as IGL is shut up and let Niko talk sometimes, or just let Niko do his thing. And so unfortunately, I also get the vibe. That's why I'm with you, Niko. I want to see Snax with Malbs. And by the way, give him anyone else. Maybe he gets Simple. Maybe he gets some mega players. Maybe he gets Spinks. There's all sorts of big names he could get. But I'll tell you what, I'll be very interested to see what he does without the Niko calls, though. Because Niko definitely is a player. I mean, think about how long he's played. He has mastered how to be a rifler in the mid to late game. His macro as a star player is excellent. It is comparable to the greats of old. The get rights, the shocks, the ones who can make those mid-round moves. And they don't need the IGL to do it because they're actually best suited to make the play for themselves. The problem is when you take that player out, that's why actually, in a weird way, if you're Snax, look, I actually know Snax. I know he doesn't give a flying fuck, by the way. He's not trolling. He actually genuinely just doesn't care what people think, because at the end of the day, you would have never signed him to this team if it was off fan assessment. You'd never think he'd win a trophy. He did. He's done all these things. So to him, it's like he can tank it. But I'll tell you what, if he ever wants to actually get real credit as an IGL, he could get it next year. Whatever team he has next year, almost certainly he's going to have to do something that is more than whatever people speculate he did in this team. I think this team, funny enough, the one area it is comparable to hooXi is when hooXi did have that JKS lineup and every player could frag out. Like, that's why, unfortunately, people didn't give hooXi his due. You know, it wasn't one of the best IGLs of all time, but I always thought he did something. He's not just sitting there like a bot died every round. So I think it's one of the hardest ones to separate from the stars, because his stars, I think Niko and m0NESY got to be two of the most polished stars you'll ever get. It just seemed like they know what to do already.
Yeah, and you think about like the learning process Eam has had, right? As someone who was this kind of maybe similar journey to m0NESY in that he was very good in Gamer Legion in the same roles, but then in Na'Vi, they spent like 6 months trying to get him to be a good secondary caller before he could be anything like that. Like losing Niko, losing those second round calls, there's like 10 years of experience in those positions. Like this is not going to be easy for m0NESY at all. As much as like talent wise, he's probably as good as you're going to get like from anyone. I think it will reflect very, very well on Snax and Taz if they can get m0NESY to be a good return caller. Because you can't just shoot heads in these positions that Niko plays. You can't. You need more.
Who do you think goes to G2 though? Because obviously we've seen all the rumors that m0NESY is now staying, which I think is actually very exciting. And
I don't know if
I
believe that conversation of it. I don't know.
I think look from what
I would
we've
prefer
heard
it for the narrative.
He's not staying because he wants to stay. He's staying because the only way he gets out is if he runs his contract down. And I think that just means that G2 and Falcons are going to be dead teams again for like a year again.
That's the worst.
Do you think G2 will be?
And it's going to limit
will they be
who
dead?
G2 get, because it's going to limit who G2 can get. Because if you're, I think Striker said it unconfirmed already. Like Jimmy has basically said, I'm not going to Falcons unless m0NESY joins Falcons, right? And it'll be the same conversation as G2. Is like, can you guarantee, if you're someone like a Robs or a Spix or something, and you're speaking to G2, you're saying, is m0NESY there in a year? Because you're not replacing m0NESY with like good author. Like there aren't.
Again, we've said there's barely any.
There aren't any. Like even some pious, like some pious mouths as your star duo. Like a year after having Niko and m0NESY, like it's good. It's not the same. It's nowhere near the same.
And by the way, I'll just throw this in. This isn't a minor equation either. You don't get the Falcons money when you go to G2. You just get the normal. Listen, everyone working in McDonald's, just hold it down. You do get 20k a month. You do get 25. Look, I understand that's ridiculous, but you don't get 60k a month. You know what I mean? So like, that's also why it's not going to be as attractive as people think. Like, sadly, I actually get scared that they are just going to fill out another 68 month temporary roster where you try and fuck around and win a blast and do what you can. You have m0NESY, but yeah, like you say, it's going to be a lineup where it's almost essentially forget dead. It'll never be alive. You'll know from day one. This is where you're just waiting for it to transition to the post m0NESY era.
Yeah,
surely
like,
though,
really
I was going to say, surely though, go you go on about the anchors, and then I'll tell you my great big
what bullshit anchor are you signing to this team? Fucking Crimbo or something coming in.
The way Taz is talking is like, oh, we're cooking. Like,
oh Jesus, no.
So you're expecting, like you said in the interview, so you're expecting like an Arrowsdos, Crimbo, like Jota, people like that, right?
Makes me feel sick inside.
Okay, the way if you're G2, you're like, I actually want to keep m0NESY. I actually want to be the best team in the world. I'm one of the 3 like super orgs in fucking esports. If you want to just go balls to the wall, you get Jail for Hunter and Bit for Niko, and Bit anchors, and Jail is just a better version of Hunter. And then you have m0NESY, Snax, and it doesn't matter that it's Snax.
Problem is, will those players need Na'Vi?
No,
what do you think?
But Bit's m0NESY's best friend. Bit's m0NESY's best friend. So I think the only way G2 keep m0NESY is if they get Bit.
I'll give you an angle though. Here's why even though I agree, if we can do Football Manager and this isn't a real move and we can just do it, I agree that would be a great move. Here's the problem though. I'm just thinking back to when Bit just appearing in a photo with m0NESY had loads of people hating on him because he's a Russian player. Like, bro, you're going to suit up next to them. Like, listen, if you can do it, God bless. Like, if you can handle that tag. That's another thing I always say about Zontix, mate. People don't know this, but he is tanking every time he's in that team. He's not having a great time, so you have to win. So I don't know. That's a tall order. It's a tall order, that one.
He did get a major, so.
Well, he wasn't happy about it.
Yeah, no, none of them looked like they were very happy about it, to be fair. With the G2 conversation, I was going to say, if you've got m0NESY, like I would build around that. I would put a lot of money into getting a really strong roster, because m0NESY, if you're winning trophies, are you telling me if that player is winning trophies in the first 6 months with like a banging lineup, and then the next 6 months he's going to leave? No, he'll probably go, oh, hold on, actually, it might be better if I stay here. We're winning. Winning players tend to be happy.
I understand you work with Blast. You can have your own opinion. All I'm going to say is this. I'm not actually saying my opinion about Blast now. I'm actually not fully on the Cassandra. I think now they've got BO5 finals and there's real tournaments in the top tier. I think now it's not really a banana cook. It's harsh. It's more like an m0NESY. It's just more like the mid-tier, the Chengdus, the Rios, etc. But my problem I do have is this, is they did win both of the Blasts of the season and it didn't seem like it made a single fucking difference to Niko or even potentially m0NESY. It didn't even seem like it registered. Spoiler, they're not going to ever cry when they lift that Blast trophy. That's just the real thing. Tell you what, they will cry if they get a Katowice. They absolutely will. I didn't say that. That's the players and their own emotions betraying them again. That's why you need to be stoic and keep it all in, guys. Don't ever let anything out. Don't ever let the world know your weakness and be alpha.
Team spirit.
Like team spirit. Well, team spirit. Some would say they've gone too alpha in that regard. Let a little bit out. Still live. Got to enjoy food as well. Just go, it's okay. But no, I actually do think, unfortunately, that's the problem, Sam. Maybe they can win. Again, if you have m0NESY, you have mobs, maybe you can win a Blast. Maybe you can win m0NESY, but is that the trophy that makes you stay? I feel like it had to just be like Majors and Cologne. Otherwise, I don't think it would even have registered and made them ever reconsider. So I'd even throw that out there as well. The most disturbing thing to me, if I'm going to join G2 now, is going, but why is there no possible way m0NESY will stay with you guys? Like, he's potentially like a top player in the world. He's winning trophies. You can build around him. You've got other pieces. Like, what is it? What doesn't he have to come out? At that point, I need to know. Before I can even join, I have to go m0NESY Pro, please. What is it? What is it that you don't like about the team? Because apparently you're not even going to Falcons necessarily. So where are you going? Why is it anywhere but G2? And is it Snax? Please sit Snax. No, but that's my own bias. So
I've put so much money on him just joining Niko as soon as he can. Like, I don't know when his contract ends. If it's December next year, July next year, I think it's just, as long as Niko doesn't drop off a cliff, like, there's just m0NESY's joining.
Or jump off a cliff, either way. Yeah,
that would also be bad.
I mean, the problem is there is a very good chance he could drop off the cliff because he is joining Falcons, and I am starting to wonder if that's going to be another situation of a dead team walking, like you mentioned, Nero, because we've just heard with m0NESY not going, the YimFAC conversation is out the window. I mean, are they going to get the superstar lineup that they promised us last year and they couldn't get? Is it just going to be the same stuff all over again, where you're going to have maybe a Niko sitting there and he's just going to be surrounded by the only pieces that were available or were willing to go there?
I think it might be even worse than that. They might have to bring their players back, right? Because you look at the Valve ranking points. Okay, they're not getting any invites unless they have 3 players who were in a top 8 team last year, or some rule like that, right? So the easiest way for them to do that is obviously bring back one of Pius, Madden, or Snappy, because then you have Niko and Magisk, and then +1. But the harder way to do that is to actually buy someone out of these teams that are like, is m0NESY coming? If m0NESY's not coming, I'm not coming. And then you're looking at teams below that, right? What I would like to see from Falcons is to just give up on this superstar thing, because you look at all the best sport washers in sports, right? It's not PSG, it's Man City. And what Man City did is they bought expensive players because everyone knew they were still good, but they were young players, they were hungry players, they were players that would come into a system led by someone like Zonic or Guardiola or something, and they'd respect that system. They weren't just putting all the 28-year-old superstars who have peaked 3 years ago in the same team. Like, that's not how you build a winning team from nothing.
Which is PSG, for enough. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
That's not how you. If you have infinite money, the way to do it is to plan for a year in advance instead of 5 years in advance. Sure. Like, I'm not saying do Gamer Legion. You don't need to buy Flammers from D'Amiga, but you could probably buy, one of these other star players who are 22, 24. Like, just stop buying 28-year-olds, please. And I know m0NESY's not 28, but it's still, you're shopping from the top shelf when, at this point, I think you just go a bit slower. Just buy one of these really good players and build an actual team. And I think maybe that's what ENCE could have been. I just think they got the wrong parts, because without NERDS, that ENCE team was never going to work. And they had Dupree instead of NERDS. And I think they're going to end up doing it again, where they're going to just scramble around. They're going to try and buy every core in the top 24 just to try and get into Kato and the Major and stuff. And if that doesn't work, they're just going to be left with the same thing. And I worry about Niko and Magisk, because they're 2 of my favorite players. And how many events are we going to see them at next year right now? Like Bounty? They're going to play Bounty? That's it? What are we talking about here?
By the way, even though it's never, ever been officially confirmed, I just know from my sources behind the scenes that for whatever reason you could imagine, they just don't want to sign players from Israel to Team Falcons. And by the way, I'd even go ahead and say now, don't just make it one way. I think some of those players might not want to join Falcons for similar reasons. They might have their own. Maybe they are on the other side of an ideological divide there. But that is obviously the worst time in history for that to be your problem when you consider that people like Nerds, Spinks and Flames are also the players that after the ones you'd sign first, they're the next ones you want to sign. And even worse for people like Spinks, they might be available. They might actually be ready to join. By the way, if it wasn't for that angle, I imagine Nerds will join tomorrow. You know what I mean? I think he even would have joined in the first place. So that's also a bomber, because the other thing I was thinking with Falcons is, if you're Falcons, if you don't want to do what you're saying, get the points via the core and use the ranking. If you just want to build a real team, the other angle you can do is just wait for everyone else to make their cuts and pick those players up. Like, I'll tell you what, here's an angle, right? Let's say FaZe does some cuts. Well, if I've already got Niko, mate, maybe I can take Brokey or Rain or something like that. Maybe they can join my team and be really good. Like, at the end of the day, I've got Niko. Like, that's the piece you didn't have in FaZe. Again, for a G2 or a Vitality, look, if it can't be those ones, again, by the way, if m0NESY's available, I'd take him as my player in Falcons. Why not? He's good enough. So I want to see, do they go some shrewd approach? I do think, by the way, it's also not the end of the world to bring some pies back. Again, we had this discussion earlier. This is why he was always underrated. You go watch all my podcasts. I said it from the beginning of the year. The reason he was underrated is I can't believe how many people in 2024 never just sat down and did the count of like how many great AWPers are there. Because once you got past about 4, it had to be this guy and Wonderful. Like, there was no one left. Like, it's him, Torji. Like, that's the best we got. After that, the drop off in AWPer is crazy. Like, mid-tier AWPer now isn't even a star player in CS. Like, it's actually wild.
If I know Blast Bounty, this literally happened a few hours ago, and I've been trying to stay off social media and have an actual holiday. But my understanding is Blast Bounty invites went out. Falcons is definitely in there. Does that not mean that their lineup had to be?
They got the wild card one, I
Blast?
believe. I think it said at the end that they got the one where it's just based on, like, you can do it off history and your big names. It's comparable, and it's implied to me, Nero, it's like Wimbledon, whether what you do is, instead of inviting the 129th best player, you just invite an old great player that still wants to play in the tournament, will bring some fans or whatever, you know. I got the vibe it was that sort of an invite.
Yeah, but there's not going to be wildcard invites for like the Kato and Major, so they are going to sort out. But the way it works is so you need 3 players who were on a top 8 team in the last year. So Falcons qualified because of that top 4 at Kato, so they were top 8 in Valve ranking. Right. So that's the way, because everyone's like, well, how have they secured the invite? Because it's not just a pure wildcard. You can't just invite whoever you want. Right. There are rules, so they've either submitted to Blast a roster that includes like real players from real teams, or they've had to like just tell Sampius or Madden or someone, just, you're not actually benched anymore. And I think Sampius is the one that makes sense because like you're saying, but he's the best AWPer available, which is why the simple thing is so mental to me, and it just had to be upper management. Because if you were improving that Falcons team, there's 4 rifler spots there that I would have improved first before Sampius. I mean, maybe Majors, obviously 3 rifler spots. So Majors and Sampius are the ones to me that shouldn't have left that team if they were trying to make changes.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And I think Snappy as well, they've done him so dirty as well. But
you notice as well, though,
that's a different podcast.
Now there's this mystery of, it was one thing, if m0NESY was coming to Falcons, then it's easy why Simple says, I'm not joining or whatever. Now it throws into question the whole thing, like, where's Simple going? That's a big piece on the table too.
Is he going anywhere though? Can anyone afford Simple?
Well, here's the other thing. I don't believe it was ever really 3 million. And I think actually that's just like sight unseen. You have to pay 3 million. By the way, if you're Na'Vi, you'd be doing an even worse job than G2 if you didn't sell him at this point in time. Like, his contract's going to run out soon enough at that point in time. Like, you get nothing for him. It makes no sense to have the biggest star in the game, not player, star though, big name. Makes no sense to let that player walk for free. That's a very stupid move. If I'm them, by the way, forget 3 million. Anything over 1 million, I say, yeah, I'll snap your hand off instantly, yes. So, but that means, though, by the way, think of some of the discussions we just had. If you are a Vitality and you have to lose Spinks and you think, who can I get? If you are G2 and Niko's going, who knows if m0NESY stays or not? These are the teams where, look, I always say it this way. I don't know if it'll work in the server, but if your fans here, we're getting Simple, in the short term, that will satisfy them. That will make them go, okay, hey, we're still cooking. Maybe this can work. That'll give you the dream. That'll give you some hope, I think.
Yeah, he might not qualify you to a major, but you do get like the most watched CCT match of all time. So definitely worth it. Definitely worth $1 million for sure.
I'm curious if anyone wants him. And I know that's a controversial take. I don't think teams want him. I think that he has a reputation and they don't want to deal with the reputation. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. I've never been in a team with him, but
I don't think it's as much. I mean, I think it maybe is a little bit of that kind of as a teammate thing as well, but it's also like the standards he would set I think he's probably still only wanting to join a team that's able to win, right? Like it seemed like him not extending with Falcons was as much his decision as their decision, from the outside at least. And you're looking at like the ranking, and you're like, would Simple go to a mouse? Like, would he within himself think that was a good move for him? As much as in the outside, it's like, okay, I think he would improve them. He'd give them a winning edge, and obviously, like the personalities probably don't mesh that well. But from the outside, I think Simple would look at a mouse and say, I think I'm still better than a mouse. I think he would. And I think that's probably the problem, is you're waiting for the dominoes to fall in teams like G2 and Vitality, because they're the only teams that would want to pay Simple and would actually be able to attract Simple. I think Falcons is a special case because of bag and promise of Niko and the best players. But like in normal teams, like Simple, he's just going to stay on the bench until something crazy happens. And before you know it, it will have been 2 years and he's played 6 series, and then it's a huge risk, because it was already a risk for Falcons, and I think it's a risk that didn't pay off. I think it made them worse. So I struggle to see any landing point for him this offseason as well.
Kind of on the same page. I mean, I'm just the page that I'm on for Falcons, because it was a conversation that came up the whole year, is I think, like you said, Nero, the super team idea is gone. It is not going to work. And I do think that if Falcons messes this up at the start of the year and they are stuck with this other roster that just isn't working, I don't think all the money in the world is going to attract good players to that team after that. I think that it's kind of that, like, they'll have the black mark, right, where people go, well, you don't want to go there because they don't really know what they're doing. That's what I think. They're in that weird situation where if they
I think you're
stuff it
being
up
too
now,
kind. Here's the reason you're being too kind. Anyone who's watched football knows, absolutely, there are many very, very good players who will trap themselves on a bad team if you give them a big enough bag. Like, spoiler, there's a certain team called Manchester United that people keep joining, even though you know it's a shit show, because you join because they overpay. They just have to pay 10 million more. And here's the other thing as well. This is where I'll tap into what he was saying about Simple. Also, one of the things that makes great players great is they are delusional. They do think they're a bit narcissistic. They do think they're solipsistic too. They think the world is just them and how they play. So here's the problem. In the same way as Simple, even though I agree, I don't think he would go to a mouse. If he did, he would think he'd still be Simple and make the mouse the greatest mouse ever. So I actually think, unfortunately, there are people out there who, you or I might go, would that even work? They'd go, no, that's when Falcons would be good, when I joined. When I walk in the room, it all changed. I think there's also young stars like that who have that sort of attitude, you know?
That's a fair point.
We're both Liverpool fans. We've seen City. We're scarred by this.
Exactly.
I think eventually Falcons are just going to be the best team in the world, and it's probably just going to be when m0NESY's contract ends. That's what I think. But I want to know about
basically, if you don't get that, what you mean there is, if you follow football long enough, unless you are PSG, the bastards that have all the money just eventually do get the players, unfortunately. They're allowed to fail because it's like Man City. Yeah, they can have a midfielder not work out. They've got about 7 in reserve, you know, and about 3 of them would start elsewhere. Remember, they used to just have Cole Palmer on their bench and go, nah, I don't want to put him in the game. Like he could star in another team, isn't he? That's what it's like for the superstar teams. Unfortunately, they get there in the end. That's why.
You know what'll kill me? You know what will kill me is karrigan goes to Falcons. I will be heartbroken.
I'm amazed. I'm actually amazed how many people keep speculating all these moves, because I don't get it. To me, look, I'm not a clip I've ever talked about this in privately. I'm the sort of person who talks about the game with people privately, don't ask them about their life or whatever. But I've never ever got the vibe he will leave FaZe again. I think for real, he's either just like FaZe IGL or FaZe coach or retired. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone knows something I don't, but I don't get the vibe he's like. And I don't care about, by the way, if he can have the roster elsewhere, if he can get the back. I don't think those are factors for him. I really think he doesn't just want to win. I also think he wants to win in the modern day with a certain type of player who buys into his approach. I don't think he wants. I actually think on paper, look, we all put him in the super team. If you could make the team that had Niko and Simple and Z all at once, you'd make karrigan the IGL. But actually, that probably wouldn't be a very good team. You know what I mean? Like, I think he actually wants players that are just a fraction below that, so they sort of know his value in a way.
Mm-hmm. But you know what would be crazy is that if that did happen, you've got karrigan with the coach that kicked him, m0NESY, and the player that kicked him, Niko. And then it's just full narrative. And then, you know, but I think the only way I see karrigan leaving FaZe is if everyone else leaves as well. Like if FaZe is the core that Falcons try and go for, and they take like, you know, like karrigan with maybe Robson Frozen or Robson Berkey or something like that. That's the only way I'd see him.
Oh, by the way, FaZe is also in the category I put Falcons before. Because remember, FaZe doesn't have the Israeli angle. By the way, if we're hearing that G2 and potentially Vitality, by the way, it sounds to me, is almost certainly going to do a roster move. Some of the friction is real in that team, and it literally does span across like potentially 3 players in the team. It's basically everyone except Zebu, and you can pick who you think the other players are, I won't say for now. But there's actually mad friction where people could go or leave at any moment. Again, if I'm FaZe, I'm taking anyone you're letting out go. So is Spink's leaving? Tell you what, bring him over here. He can come in. I'm taking whoever you got, mate. Whoever you got, we'll take him in. Bring him over.
It's definitely a problem with Vitality. I saw Apex's tweet after the major where he basically said that they did. I'm going to paraphrase now. Basically, it's impossible to win something like this when you're not really a team.
Yeah.
I think those were the words. And I was like, wow, okay, boom, there it is. This is a group of people that are not getting on. That's the end. So that was pretty interesting as well. We didn't actually talk a lot about Vitality this year on Feed the Trolls. I think we had like 1 or 2 episodes.
I mean, they did only win 1 tournament. It's crazy. Actually, if you don't know, on Hot Take Point Made, my take was Vitality might be like the most underwhelming, potentially great team ever in Counter-Strike history. Because if you look at this year, there wasn't, I mean, I know Na'Vi was amazing, but they weren't totally dominant. In fact, they even used to win by small margins. They'd win going to 3 maps or a close game. They would just get it done. I actually think in history, like if you look back, Vitality was supposed to be the team that won everything. What are we talking? Even, by the way, remember they came into the year as the best team. They've kept the same lineup. All the lineup looks dope, by the way. They all have different times when they're good. They've managed to, I think what they've done with the map pool proves what I'm saying. You cannot rotate through all the maps in the pool and like they did and find success unless your team just has the pieces and has the roles. It's just that the ultimate irony is what they didn't appear to have is everything we can't see, is the intangibles off the server. Something went wrong with the personality balance, or if people liked each other, or if people liked the way they were playing. Because I don't get it. Again, if you do like a football manager, give me that lineup. You can have Na'Vi's lineup. I'll win. What are you talking about? Look at these players. How would I not? In fact, when I go back, I think of how many times I saw them in semis where it's like, bro, they're actually the favourite in all these matches, because I actually think with their back veto, you can't ever be the favourite over Vitality. I don't get it. I always used to say, it's so sad to me they played Na'Vi so few times. I actually thought that was the matchup where you would have seen that Na'Vi aren't superstars. They're just a really good team. And when you actually bring in the people like the Zewas of the world, they have a hard time sometimes getting to that 10 out of 10 level.
I think Vitality are the team that actually have the best, like on paper, combination of the calling and the firepower, because like Spinks, Flamesy, Zywoo is just like, that's a trio as good as anyone's, right?
Yeah.
So obviously. And then Apex is like, he won IGL of the year. Like
I think he did a good job.
It was peer voted last year. And I just think I prefer Apex in a team with people like Magisk and Dupree, I think. Like, I think sometimes on the face cams, you watch him kind of get angry at his teammates. And it's like, okay, that's normal. It happens to everyone. But I think, like, if you went to like a leadership seminar, they wouldn't tell you to be like what Apex is to Spinks when he's just shouting down the line.
Sure.
Like, the next round is live. Like you're the guy. Like compare it to Kixan in the major. Like they lose a 5v1 and he's like locked in straight away, and it's like that's fine. That's fine. And then he calls the next round. And I think like there's still like the captaincy qualities that Apex has, like the leader of men. Like that is obviously insane. But I think some of these losses this year have to be on him losing his cool a little bit about someone else's mistake. So it's always something else that tilts him. But I think like having a captain who tilts, like I think in 2023 he did that way less, at least like from my memory. Like I think that happened way less, and I think maybe that's the difference this year, is that maybe he would, like, if he was here, he'd say, well, that's because people are making stupid mistakes, and how would you not get annoyed? But I think from the outside, I think they could have reset in some of these situations, and I think it was on him that they didn't, because maybe X has as well.
No, I'll give you that. Put it this way, in the same way as I intuit that, bear in mind, I don't think Na'Vi's players are superstars. I have to give a lot of credit to Blade and Alexi. I think similarly, you have to give a lot of criticism to Stars and Apex in that regard. They had the pieces. Yeah, I'm good with you.
They had the pieces. And this is interesting, because now if I look back to the whole year, like we got some things right, we got some things wrong. But actually, none of it matters, because all the top teams, it would appear, most of them anyway, are not going to exist in the forms we see them now. At the beginning of next year, G2, FaZe, probably, Vitality, I'm putting Falcons up there, but there's just going to be massive changes of all those teams that you saw in the major playoffs. I mean, maybe Heroic and Spirit keep their lineups, maybe Na'Vi keeps their lineup, but everyone else...
I mean, interesting one to me is Team Liquid. I actually think on that one, that top 8, I'm going to do a piece on this soon. That is fool's gold all up and down, mate. There's not a single marker or eye testing tells you that was real. Like, even the problem is your brain goes Team Liquid, those twists, like these players should be in the top 8. But if you look at that squad, like if I were them, I would still be considering both positions. Both fucking Ikinda and Ultimate. Just depends who's out there. Because I'm getting, by the way, if some Pius is available, I'm still diss to Ultimate. I'm taking some Pius. By the way, there's also another thing. No one's thinking of that angle. Can Team Liquid players not join any of the teams we're talking about? Why not? There's some pretty good fucking players in those squads. Yeah, Twist said he wouldn't go and join Falcons, but I mean, I've said this before. I hope people get this. If you are Naf and Elige, you didn't watch Twists and FaZe and go, oh, great job, Russell. You went, wait a minute, why don't I just join a team like that? Then I get to do all that. Like, you know what? It's really hard sledding being the main star carrying everyone. I'd like to be the guy where you just sort of contribute in your own little way and everyone knows what your role is. And then you have Robs and you have karrigan and you win all the majors. I think they're all thinking that way now, mate. So I think this last one, by the way, I think NAF did TL a solid by sticking around for that one. I know, but there's a reason why in the interviews they now all say they're open to it. Maybe I would be. I guess CS is in Europe anyway now, isn't it? That they haven't changed their tune because they hate living in NA. They just want to win finally. So I'd also love to see some of those players potentially go somewhere else. Or get a better player. By the way, or do players the other way. Like, by the way, I think Team Liquid would be a good gamble for Simple if he was willing to do it. That's a squad where they could gain from it, he could gain from it. I don't know if it's even viable, but that wouldn't be a terrible swap.
Yeah, that's one of those. Yeah, the Twist and NAF combo, like that is just, it's too good for the other three. It's just way too good. And unfortunately, I just, like that major run, like I think, because I even did an article on it when I found out, like the opposition they beat. It's like 14, it was like 15, 16, and 17, and you're in the major top 8, and you see.
And they barely beat them, because you know everyone did that noob thing where they went, but Vitality shit down their throats and made them look like they shouldn't even play CS. Team Liquid like barely beat those teams. Like, oh my god, we just got through 13-10. Like that was too close. Those are bad squads as well.
And there's potential in Ultimate. Like he's fun, but it's not. But it's not a long-term thing, right?
I had a whole conversation that was like the final point, was that we needed to talk about North American CS, specifically Liquid and Complexity. But then I looked at the time and I was like, we're not going to have time. So that was the end of that. I mean,
ironically, much like NA. So,
and on that note, thank you so much for watching. We will be back next year, but we're all going to take a break now. So we'll see you in 2025.